What stirs in the silence beyond the Emperor's light, when even the memory of heroes begins to fade? Some say the dead dream in the warp. Others whisper that the warp dreams of the dead. And on a forgotten world, where ash falls like mourning shrouds and time itself trembles, something long buried begins to wake. The storm came first. Not merely wind nor rain, but a psychic gale that tore through the night like a blade of cold fire. Monolithic spires groaned as the shadows thickened, bending toward a singular point at the world's broken heart. There, beneath an ancient fortress monastery swallowed by centuries of dust, a chamber hummed with returning life. Silver runes ignited across marble floors. Sigils older than the Imperium pulsed like beating hearts. And in the center, encased in stone and sanctified steel, lay a figure preserved in absolute stillness. A name forgotten by all but prophecy: Janus. Across the void, a lone strike cruiser drifted through the debris of a dead system, its hull scarred by battles never recorded. Within its sanctum, a gray knight knelt before a scrying pool of purest argent, watching as the warp rippled with an unfamiliar resonance. The ship's librarians whispered oaths under trembling breath. They recognized the call, an echo encoded into their order's very creation. The light within the pool flickered, resolving into the faint silhouette of a gaunted hand pushing through stone dust. The silence that followed felt impossibly vast, as if the galaxy itself dared not breathe. The knight rose, armor plates shifting like whispered prayers, sensing destiny bleed into reality. The world below was a graveyard of forgotten wars, its continents split like broken sigils. Pilgrims once sought miracles here, but only ruins remained, deep caverns choked with incense ash and statues worn to ghostly outlines. As the psychic storm intensified, those ruins stirred. Statues cracked. Dust spiraled upward in unnatural currents, dancing like gray phantoms around a central crypt carved with the sigil of Titan. The seals that bound it began to fracture. Each crack echoed like thunder across the catacombs. Runes ignited in searing silver light that bled into the chamber's darkness. The air itself felt reverent, fearful, alive. And then the sarcophagus groaned open, exhaling a cold breath that had slept for millennia. In its depths, a pair of eyes lit with the soft glow of psychic flame. Janus inhaled as if tasting reality anew. His armor, silver like frozen moonlight, shifted with faint, ritualistic clinks, shedding centuries of dust. The chamber recognized him, illuminating ancient inscriptions of battles fought when the Imperium was still young and fragile. He rose with the silent poise of a being not merely awakened, but summoned. Memories rippled through his mind in fractured visions. Demons shrieking in golden halls, titans shrouded in psychic storms, an emperor's will woven into his very existence. He felt the galaxy's trembling heartbeat and the thin, cracking edge of a secret too long preserved. On the planet's surface, the storm birthed shapes within the murk shadows, not made of matter but malice. They slithered through the ruined monastery, drawn by the pulse of awakening power. Ghostly silhouettes with eyes like burning coal drifted across cracked mosaics, warping them with each passing. They hissed at the light blooming from the depths below, recoiling yet compelled. Something sacred was rising, and the warp itself sought to hunt it. The ruins strained under their presence, stone melting into sickly flesh, icons deforming into blasphemous parodies. But even as the corruption crept closer, the chamber below shone brighter, humming with the voice of the Emperor's wrath and mercy intertwined. The strike cruiser descended through the storm, its engines roaring like caged thunder. Within its grand hall, the assembled gray knights stood as one, silver statues of unbroken faith. The brother captain marched to the observation altar, psychic flames reflecting off his storm-scarred helm. He addressed his warriors without raising his voice. He did not need to. Every knight felt the call. Every one of them knew the significance of such a psychic resonance, a return long denied, a legend materializing from myth. Their teleportarium crackled with argent lightning as they prepared to breach the surface, Yet beneath their discipline lay the faint tremor of awe. For this was not a rescue mission. It was pilgrimage. As Janus ascended from the catacombs, each step echoed with ritual weight. Runes followed him, awakening in a cascading trail of light. His mind gathered fractured memories, each one sharpening, reshaping him. The fortress had changed. The galaxy had changed. But the presence in the warp-hungry, reckless, titanic remained familiar. He could sense its tendrils writhing just beyond the veil, testing his resolve. He paused before a shattered mural depicting the birth of the Grey Knights. The faces were eroded by time, yet one figure wreathed in silver fire remained unblemished, his own image. Prophecy, memory, and identity converged into a single truth. He had not been forgotten. He had been hidden. The demonic shadows reached the crypt entrance, their forms contorting into predatory shapes. Their whispers whirred through the air, promising oblivion, promising twisted rebirth. As they lunged into the sanctified chamber, Janus lifted his hand. Light erupted silent, absolute, divine. The shadows disintegrated in a chorus of screams swallowed by the stone walls. The storm outside recoiled, momentarily collapsing into silence. Janus lowered his hand slowly, his expression unreadable behind the glow in his eyes. He knew this was not the true enemy. These were merely scouts sniffing out a secret that should never have been exposed. The galaxy was stirring, and with it, forces that remembered him all too well. Far above, the brother captain felt the psychic flare like a blade pressed against his thoughts. He staggered not from weakness, but from recognition. That brilliance, that purity, that unmistakable signature. Janus, the first, the myth made manifest. He signaled the immediate descent. The teleportarium roared to life, energy spiraling into argent vortices. Knights stepped into the warp light with unwavering faith. Yet as the runes pulsed around them, a flicker of dread crept across the brother captain's mind. For if Janus had awakened, then something else had awakened with him, something ancient. Something the Order had sworn to bury even deeper than his resting place. He pushed the fear aside, but could not silence it. Lightning split the sky as the Grey Knights materialized upon the shattered plateau before the monastery. Their boots struck the stone like a unified heartbeat. The storm parted for them, forming a vast corridor of swirling fog and fractured light. The ruined spires loomed like gravestones. The psychic pressure intensified, thick, heavy, mournful. The brother captain led his warriors inside, their halberds raised, their minds shielded by prayer. Silver light leaked from the depths below, bathing the ruin in ghostly luminescence. With each step, the air grew warmer, as if touched by a living flame. But beneath the warmth hid something colder, older. Wrong. And when they reached the staircase descending into darkness, every knight paused. A trail of glowing footprints, fresh, bright, unmistakably human, led down into the catacombs. But alongside them, half-melted scorch marks traced the floor, as though something had slithered beside him. Something dragging itself out of the warp. The knights advanced, silver helms locking into formation, their hearts pounding not with fear but revelation. They followed the footprints into the depths, unaware that the walls around them had begun to whisper in voices not heard since the earliest days of Titan. Some secrets are resurrected. Others awaken on their own. The catacombs breathed like a wounded Titan, every corridor trembling with the psychic residue left in Janus' wake. The Grey Knights moved deeper, their formation tightening as the walls whispered in voices both ancient and impossibly familiar. The brother captain felt each syllable claw at the edges of his soul liturgies from the founding of their order, spoken in tones warped by centuries of burial. At his side strode a chaplain whose skull helm glimmered in the dim argent light. He muttered counter prayers beneath his breath, trying to drown out the encroaching murmurs. Yet even he could feel the subtle shift in the air, devotion twisting into memory, memory twisting into warning. The glowing footprints of Janus shimmered ahead like molten silver, but the second trail, the warped scorch patterns seared into the stone, seemed to pulse faintly, as though something unseen still crawled beside them. And somewhere far below, a heartbeat echoed that was not Janus, too slow and too old to be mortal. The first sign of deeper corruption came as a change in temperature. Warmth, soft and almost human, drifted through a fissured archway that should have been frozen from centuries of abandonment. A Justicar knelt and brushed the dust, feeling it scatter like ash caught in dying sunlight. A faint resonance pulsed from beneath the floor, steady, rhythmic, calling in a way that felt like a reversed prayer, faith recited backward into the warp. The chaplain stepped forward, scanning his Crozius over the stone. Runes emerged, half-formed, half-erased sigils not of Titan, but of something older, something forbidden. He recognized only fragments, the Ouroboros of duality, the mirrored flame. Symbols from a doctrine the Grey Knights did not speak of. Could not speak of. The brother captain's jaw tightened beneath his helm. These esoteric signs should not exist here. They had been erased from their order's annals before any current knight had been born. Yet here they pulsed like veins beneath the stone, feeding an unseen truth. Further ahead, the footprints deepened, their edges sharper, as though Janus had begun to walk with greater certainty, perhaps even purpose. But the scorch marks beside them had changed, growing less like burns and more like impressions, claw-like indentations pressing into the stone. The Knight Apothecary examined one closely, his gauntlet hovering just above the warped surface. The stone was still warm, too warm, as if the creature that left it existed halfway between flesh and immaterial thought. Warp residue, but patterned, he whispered, his voice strained. This was not a demon's passing. This was accompaniment. The brother captain said nothing. The silence pressed against him, demanding understanding he did not possess. And yet, somewhere deep in the marrow of his memory, a phrase surfaced, one spoken only once, during his ascension to Justicar. Where the first walks, the reflection follows. He had dismissed it then as metaphor. Now he wasn't so sure. The knights reached a vast chamber where the ceiling stretched high into shadow. Once, it must have been a hall of relics. Now the pedestals lay shattered, their contents missing or melted into pools of darkened metal. A single surviving statue stood at the center, a towering depiction of Janus himself, carved in an age when art still aspired to honesty. His expression was serene, resolute, noble, but the statue was wrong. It possessed two shadows, one cast by the flickering light of the knights' halberds, and another, thinner and jagged, cast by no light source at all. It quivered subtly like a second heartbeat. The chaplain stepped forward, raising his Crozius, but the brother captain placed a hand upon his pauldron. The shadow peeled itself from the floor for a moment, just enough to suggest a second figure standing behind the first, mimicking his pose with twisted elegance. Then it receded. The knights formed the defensive circle. None spoke. They knew that demons lied and memories lied, but shadows rarely did. A distant hum drifted through the hall, vibrating the statues, the relic fragments, even the knight's armor. It grew louder, pulsing with a cadence of ritual chants, half drowned, half remembered. The brother captain recognized the tone. It was not chaos. It was not sanctified liturgy. It was something between. A ritual older than Titan's founding. A rite spoken only once, the day the Emperor's chosen eight stood upon Terra and forged a covenant. One voice in that chant had been Janus. Another had been his reflection, his twin in purpose, but not in soul. The librarian among them shuddered, psychic senses widening. "Captain," he whispered, "there are two signatures below us, one bright, one echoing, but they share the same frequency." The chaplain hissed a prayer, but even he knew the implication. The first Grey Knight had risen, and something born with him, something the Imperium had buried even more deeply, walked with him now. As they pressed deeper, the monastery changed. The walls grew smoother, less like stone and more like grown materials psychically imprinted, as if shaped by thought instead of hand. Faint silhouettes moved at the corners of vision. echoes of battles long dead. Warriors clad in armor of old Titan patterns, their forms flickering like dust caught in starlight. One paused as the knights passed, turning its featureless head toward them. It raised a hand not in threat, but in warning, and then dissolved into drifting motes. The Justicars tightened their grips on their halberds. Reality was thinning here, memories bleeding into matter. The librarian felt a presence deeper below, neither hostile nor benevolent. Watching, measuring, waiting for something to align. And beneath that presence, another like a soft whisper tracing the edges of each knight's thoughts. A whisper wearing Janus' voice, but distant, fractured, as though he were calling from behind a mirror. They found the first body soon after. A pilgrim, or what remained of one, his robes tattered, his face frozen in awe rather than terror. Something had been carved into his chest, a symbol shaped like an eye split down the center by a blade. Not chaos, not imperial, neutral, impossible. The chaplain scanned it with trembling precision. "Captain, this is the mark of the Paragon Doctrine." The air went still. Every knight knew the Forbidden's tale, that during the Grey Knight's creation, some believed each knight should bear a shadow counterpart, equal forged of controlled warp essence to maintain perfect balance, a harmony between the real and the immaterial. The Emperor had rejected this path, or so the records claimed. The brother captain felt the truth shifting beneath his feet. What if the doctrine had not been destroyed? What if it had been hidden? What if Janus was never alone? The storm above intensified, cracks of pale lightning slashing across the ceilings as loose stone fragments rained down. The walls throbbed with psychic pulses like a living artery. At the center of the descending staircase, the ground split, revealing a hollow filled with luminous mist. Within it hovered inscriptions written in a language no human tongue had spoken since the Imperium's birth. The librarian stepped forward, translating the meaning through fragmented psychic impressions. His voice shook. "This place is not a tomb, it is a vault, a convergence chamber. The first soul was divided when he was created. Light and reflection, purity and counterpart, Janus and the other." A long silenced truth rippled beneath the stone, and the knights felt the weight of a heresy older than their order. The brother captain tasted iron in his mouth. If Janus had awakened, then so had the thing born opposite him, equal in strength, bound in purpose, but not bound in loyalty. A roar thundered through the chamber, echoing up from the depths like a monstrous exhale. Torches burst alight in argent flame, shadows convulsed across the walls. The glowing footprints of Janus turned sharply to the right, descending into a passage newly split open by seismic force. But beside them, the scorch marks changed again. No longer drag marks, but decisive, confident steps. Not following, leading, the reflection had stopped hiding. The knights descended in formation, halberds raised, hearts pounding with a mixture of dread and devotion. The brother captain felt a psychic tremor ahead, a confrontation already unfolding. Two presences, identical in resonance, but opposite in intent, clashing like mirrored storms. The air grew thick, humming with a duel fought not with blades but with identity, loyalty, creation, and then for a heartbeat, a ripple of silence. A silence so profound it devoured sound itself, as if something sacred had just been severed. They reached the final threshold as the chamber below ignited in a storm of silver and shadow. Janus stood at the center, wreathed in luminant psychic fire, his stance marked by anguish rather than fury. Across from him, emerging from a veil of mirror-like shards, was his reflection, an identical figure of argent armor, but with eyes of shifting, liquid darkness. It spoke with his voice, but deeper, layered with echoes. "We were one once. We can be again," Janus' reply trembled with sorrow. "That path was Forbidden's," the reflection smiled. "All Forbidden's things are merely forgotten truths." The knights braced as reality warped between them, mirrors forming and shattering, each shard reflecting different versions of Janus faithful, broken, triumphant, corrupted. And then the reflection turned its gaze upon the Grey Knights. "Children of the Emperor," it whispered. "Did they never tell you who your first father truly was?" The chamber convulsed. And in that instant, the knights realized the greatest betrayal was not unfolding. It had already been lived and buried. And now it was waking. The chamber shuddered as Janus and his reflection stood locked in psychic tension, a duel of identity that fractured the air like splintered glass. The Grey Knights braced themselves, their armor trembling beneath the pressure of two mirrored souls struggling for dominion. The brother captain felt the weight of something shifting, something older than their order, older than Titan, pushing against the boundaries of truth. The reflection's presence slithered across their thoughts, not hateful, but intimate, as if it knew each knight by memory, by birthright. Janus' light surged, casting the chamber into a blinding glow, yet even that radiance felt fragile. Fragile like a faith stretched thin, fragile like a wound reopened. And beneath the thunder of psychic conflict, the monastery itself pulsed with an ancient rhythm, as though some primordial heart had begun beating after millennia of silence. Something was climbing toward revelation, and the galaxy held its breath. The storm outside erupted, lightning lancing through the shattered spires as the psychic clash rippled outward like a dying star's breath. Across the planet, Imperial outposts flickered, their auspex readings turning to static. Priests dropped to their knees, clutching their relics as visions spilled into their minds, visions of a silver figure walking through mirrored corridors, followed by a darker twin dragging chains of light behind him. Some saw salvation, others saw doom. One confessor screamed until his voice tore, claiming he had witnessed the Emperor's shadow peeling itself free. In a distant shrine, a sister of the Order of the Torch felt her rosary crack in her hand as whispers filled the incense smoke. The first is not whole. The first was never whole. Panic spread like wildfire through faithful and faithless alike, and even the planet's defenses seemed to falter, flickering as if unsure of which Janus they were meant to obey. Back in the catacombs, the librarian staggered, overwhelmed by the psychic storm emanating from the central chamber. Memories not his own flooded his mind. Janus standing on Titan at its founding, surrounded by 8 figures bathed in golden light. A ritual incomplete, a presence severed from him by decree. But now the memory twisted, revealing a second circle unseen, unrecorded, where identical figures stood in mirrored stances, their armor resonating with warplight instead of sanctified fire. The librarian gasped. There had been 16, not 8. Half cast into reality, half into reflection. The brother captain caught the trembling knight before he fell. Though the librarian's voice quaked, the truth could not be contained. "We are not the Emperor's purest creation," he whispered. "We are the Emperor's compromise." Silence struck the knights like a blow. In that instant, devotion wavered. Not shattered but bent, like a blade under too much pressure. The reflection stepped forward, reality warping in waves around him. The mirrored shards swirling in the air began to form images, fragments of moments the Imperium had tried to forget. The Emperor standing upon the molten surface of a newborn Titan, his expression not of triumph, but of fatigue. Golden-clad custodians turning their eyes away as the ritual split Janus into 2 forms, the Incarnate and the Echo. The Emperor's voice carved from the Echo's memory rang through the chamber. The galaxy will not bear both truth and survival. One must be buried. The Grey Knights recoiled. These were not lies, not illusions. These were raw impressions, unfiltered memories carved into the reflection's very being. Janus trembled, his psychic light flickering as though a wildfire threatened to collapse into embers. "These visions serve only to divide," he said, but his voice lacked certainty. The reflection's reply was a whisper. "A divided creation cannot remain chained forever." Above ground, war ignited. A heretic warband lurking in the system drawn by the psychic storm descended on the fractured planet like vultures sensing death. Mutated silhouettes stormed the abandoned spires, chanting profane liturgies. But they did not come merely to kill. They knelt before the storm of light and shadow erupting from the monastery, as though recognizing a prophecy finally blooming. A dark apostle raised a talon-tipped hand toward the sky, declaring that the Mirrored One was the true heir to the warp's freedom, a being born of man but touched by unrestrained potential. Imperial defenders fought desperately, lasguns flickering through the smoke-choked ruins. Faith clashed with blasphemy in torrents of fire and screaming steel. Yet even the most loyal defenders hesitated when confronted by visions spilling from the sky, visions of Janus' reflection, offering a galaxy without secrecy, without half-truths. A promise whispered into the hearts of the desperate. The knights tightened their ranks as Janus and his reflection circled one another, two perfect forms carved from the same divine blueprint, but forced into opposing purpose. Janus' voice resonated through the chamber, tinged with grief. "You were meant to remain sealed." The reflection tilted his head, eyes shimmering. "Meant by whom? By him? Or by those who feared what we represented?" Janus ignited his halberd, silver flame bursting to life, but the reflection simply raised a hand, its surface splitting like liquid mercury to reveal an identical weapon materializing from the mirrored air. The brother captain felt a tremor in his soul. If the two were equals, if one had been hidden to bolster an illusion of stability, then the Grey Knight's foundations were not divine certainty, but engineered balance. A construct. A lie. And if Janus was no longer whole, what did that make them? A deep rumble shook the planet as fault lines split open, vomiting psychic light into the sky. From orbit, the event resembled a star dying in slow motion. Within the monastery, the walls liquefied into reflective surfaces, showing not the knights' reflections, but possible versions of themselves, shattered armor, corrupted visages, triumphant forms leading unknown crusades. Time folded, bent, then snapped back. One knight saw a version of himself kneeling before the reflection instead of Janus. Another saw himself as dust beneath a burning sky. The chaplain slammed his staff into the ground, roaring prayers, but even his faith faltered under the weight of so many truths. "Hold your minds," he commanded, but the order felt increasingly hollow. The reflection turned toward the Grey Knights, eyes softening. "You were forged in division. You deserve to be whole." For a heartbeat, the words felt less like temptation and more like mercy. The battle reached its crescendo when Janus lunged, his blade meeting its mirrored twin with a shriek that shook the chamber. Light exploded outward, tearing the air apart in rippling waves. The knights were thrown back, crashing into fractured pillars. The brother captain staggered to his feet, vision blurred, and saw something new forming around the dueling figures. A lattice of mirrored structures, rising like crystalline towers, each one reflecting a different outcome of this moment. In one, Janus prevailed. In another, the reflection shattered him like glass. In yet another, the two merged, becoming something neither imperial nor warp-born. The brother captain realized with dawning horror that reality itself was beginning to choose among these possibilities. And the monastery was becoming the crucible of that choice. A choice that could define the fate of the Imperium. Then the twist came not as an explosion, but as a whisper. The librarian gasped, clutching his head. "Captain, I see it." The reflection is not Janus' opposite. Blood trickled from his nose. It is his essence, his potential unbound. Janus is the half that obeyed. The reflection is the half that questioned. The brother captain froze. Titan's myth had always spoken of purity, but purity, he now understood, was simply controlled truth. The reflection turned toward Janus, voice layered with centuries of longing. "We were never meant to be enemies. We were meant to be whole, and they chose which part of you was allowed to live." Janus faltered, the fire on him dimming. "I remember," he whispered, voice cracking. "I remember being more." The final moment struck like a blade. The reflection reached forward, not in violence, but in unification, pressing a hand against Janus' chest. Light burst outward. The knights braced for death, but instead, reality froze. Every mirror went still. The storm stopped mid-roar. The reflection leaned close, whispering to Janus words the knights could not hear. Janus' eyes widened, not in fear, but in revelation so vast it broke something inside him. When the freeze ended, the reflection stepped back and began to dissolve, not defeated, not banished, given. His essence flowed into Janus as silver fog. And Janus reborn, reforged rose with eyes now burning with both light and shadow. The first Grey Knight was whole again, and the galaxy trembled at what that meant. The light that surged from Janus' renewed form washed over the catacombs in a single shuddering breath, and for a heartbeat, the galaxy felt impossibly still. The Grey Knights stared through scorched visors at the being before them, familiar yet reshaped, as though the Emperor's own design had been rewritten in the space of a single revelation. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was dread made tangible. The brother captain sensed it first, the psychic recoil of a truth too vast to remain buried. Janus' presence pulsed with doubled resonance, harmonious, conflicted, and overwhelming, and as it rippled outward, the planet trembled beneath the weight of its awakening. Dust fell like slow rain, stone cracked like brittle parchment. Every knight felt their oaths tighten around them, not as armor but as chains binding them to a reality slipping from their grasp. And behind it all, the warp stirred with hungry recognition. Above ground, the war that had ignited now raged with feverish intensity. Heretic warbands clashed with scattered Imperial forces, their shadows flickering against the storm-filled sky like the silhouettes of monstrous angels. The psychic shock of Janus' unification split the clouds, revealing for a moment a bleeding aurora stretching across the heavens. Some defenders fell to their knees, believing the Emperor himself had descended. Others recoiled in terror, sensing an imbalance, a disturbance that even faith could not justify. A sister of the Order of the Torch pressed her fingertips against a holy icon, whispering a prayer torn between hope and fear. She felt the Emperor's light flicker within her soul, not extinguished, but hesitant, as though waiting to judge what Janus had become. Around her, smoke rose from burning trenches, mingling with incense drifting from shattered shrines. The world itself seemed to plead for clarity, but none came. In the depths of the catacombs, Janus lowered his gaze to his gauntlet hands, watching them tremble with power and memory. His voice, when it came, carried both warmth and cold like a hymn sung in a tomb. "I remember everything," he murmured, and the walls echoed his confession back to him. The librarian flinched as fragments of Janus' restored mind brushed against his thoughts, visions of Titans forging, of impossible rituals carved from hope and fear, of the Emperor's decision to sever one soul into two. The brother captain took a step forward, but hesitation caught him like a blade pressed to his throat. Was this still Janus the First, or something reborn from the fracture of divinity? Janus' eyes lifted, blazing with mirrored fire, and the knights felt exposed, not in body, but in belief. "You seek certainty," he said softly, "but certainty was never our foundation. Only obedience." The chamber convulsed as a ripple of warp energy surged outward, cracking holy seals and shattering mirrored formations into clouds of glittering dust. The ground beneath the knights split, revealing veins of argent light like molten faith. A roar thundered through the catacombs deep, echoing, almost mournful. The chaplain staggered as psychic pressure crushed against him, his litanies warring with the surge. The monastery's foundations groaned, shifting as though the structure itself resisted Janus' transformation. Through the tremor, faint shapes flickered at the edges of vision phantoms of the mirrored order that had once been, silhouettes of warriors who never belonged to reality. They reached out with hollow hands, not seeking to harm, but to witness their other half restored. The brother captain swallowed his dread as he realized what they represented. Echoes of what the Grey Knights were meant to be before the Emperor intervened. Their presence burned like forgotten truth. Above, the heretic forces froze mid-advance as a wave of psychic light erupted from the monastery's heart. Some fell screaming as their warped mutations recoiled from the purity. Others knelt, entranced by the vision of Janus' silhouette rising through the collapsing stonework like a resurrected god. The Dark Apostle staggered, feeling his connection to the warp flicker, a predator sensing a rival power ascending. "He is neither Emperor's pawn nor warp's slave," the Apostle whispered through clenched teeth. "He is unresolved." Around him, the battlefield changed. Flames turned silver, shadows trembled. Even the corrupted banners wavered as though unsure to whom they owed allegiance. Imperial forces took advantage, surging forward with renewed fury, though uncertainty gnawed at them. What were they fighting for now? What future did this war forge? The planet's sky writhed with shifting omens, each one contradicting the last. Deep below, Janus lifted his head and breathed slowly, as if acclimating to a universe he now experienced twice over. The brother captain stepped closer, voice steady despite the fear threading through it. "First of Titan, what are your orders?" For a moment, Janus did not respond. He seemed to listen to the galaxy, to the warp, to the silence between heartbeats. "Order," he repeated, as though tasting the word for the first time. "It is a fragile thing, Captain. It requires shared belief, even when belief is a wound." He looked at the knights with eyes reflecting both fire and void. "I will not command blind faith." "Not anymore," the chaplain stiffened, as if struck. "Faith is our strength." Janus shook his head gently. "Faith is your meaning, but meaning must evolve." His tone carried neither heresy nor obedience, only sorrow and resolve. A distant quake shook the monastery, sending debris cascading like falling stars. The walls split, revealing new passages that had never existed, each carved by the psychic turbulence radiating from Janus' awakening. The librarian sensed the warp stirring in response, not with pure hostility, but with anticipation. Something vast was watching, something that had felt Janus' union, and now moved across the immaterial like a predator scenting blood. The knights felt its proximity, its hunger, its fascination. The chaplain raised his crozius, chanting furiously as shadowy filaments seeped through the cracks like smoke. But Janus lifted a hand, halting them. "This is not an attack," he whispered. "It is a greeting." The shadows recoiled, pulsing with recognition. For the first time, the Grey Knights faced the unsettling possibility that Janus was no longer a weapon against the warp. He was a bridge between two incompatible truths. Above, Imperial reinforcements descended from orbit, unaware of the transformation unfolding below. Their arrival brought fresh thunder across the battlefield, drop pods carving fire through the ruins, Valkyries cutting through ash-filled skies. Commissars barked orders with voices sharpened by doctrine, unaware that doctrine itself trembled beneath them. A canoness of the Order of the Torch gazed toward the monastery, feeling her faith fracture under conflicting visions. "Is this deliverance or damnation?" she whispered. Her second-in-command answered with brutal honesty. "Only history will judge." The planet groaned beneath their boots, its tectonic plates shifting as Janus' presence altered the psychic resonance of the world. Even the atmosphere tasted different, sharp, metallic, alive. War raged with renewed urgency, but beneath every battle cry lay a shared terror that they were fighting in the presence of something that might redefine their god. In the catacombs, the brother captain felt the monastery buckling. Time ran short. "Janus," he urged, "whatever you have become, the Imperium needs clarity." Janus turned toward him slowly, expression unreadable. "The Imperium needs truth," he replied. "But truth is the one thing it fears above all else." He stepped toward the staircase leading upward, each footfall sending ripples of psychic force through the ground. The Grey Knights hesitated not out of disobedience, but because they sensed the magnitude of what he intended. "If you step into the light above," the chaplain warned, "the entire Imperium will witness your change." Janus paused. "Then let them witness." For the first time since awakening, he smiled, soft, tragic, resolute. "No empire survives on silence forever. And then the final tremor came, violent, blinding, apocalyptic. The ceiling split open as Janus reached the threshold, and a beam of light, half holy, half mirrored, descended upon him. The knights shielded their eyes, feeling the universe bend around that single moment. Through the brilliance, a colossal presence unfurled across the warp, ancient and terrible, whispering a name that had not been spoken since Titan's birth. Not Janus, the whole. And as the light swallowed him, the world held its breath, waiting to see whether salvation or catastrophe would emerge from that transformation. The first rays of false dawn bled across the ruins like the light of a dying star, touching shattered armor plates and broken banners with a pale, exhausted glow. Smoke drifted in slow spirals from the husk of the Citadel of Remembrance, each column rising like a last prayer for the fallen. And in the stillness after the storm, Janus stood upon the cracked obsidian floor, helm in hand, his expression unreadable beneath the weight of what he had seen. The veil between past and future seemed thinner here, stretched to its breaking point, each breath carrying the taste of prophecy and ash. Behind him, gray knights knelt, exhausted but unwavering, their armor scarred and luminous sigils dimmed. They had fought not for glory but for truth, and truth had cost them dearly. For the first time in an age, Janus felt the cold whisper of doubt, as if the Emperor himself were waiting for his next decision. Far below, in the lower sanctum where the dead still smoldered, Inquisitor Mareth limped through the rubble with a data slate clutched to her chest. She kept looking at the shadows, as if expecting them to lunge, twist, or speak. Her voice trembled as she approached Janus, not from fear of him, but of the revelation she now carried. "It was never just a prophecy," she murmured, placing the slate into his gauntlet hand. "It was a warning." The runes flickered to life, ancient sigils that shifted like a living code, revealing a truth so old it had outlived its own myth. Janus read in silence. The air thickened. Even the wounded knights felt something shift, as if the great engines of destiny had woken from slumber. When he finally looked up, the light behind his eyes was harder, colder. "They knew," he whispered. "They always knew," and in that moment, something within the galaxy seemed to recoil. A tremor moved through the ground, soft but deep, like the exhale of a buried titan. Dust drifted from broken pillars as the surviving knights braced for another attack, but this was no enemy's approach. It was the awakening of the fortress itself, responding to what Janus had uncovered. Runes ignited along the walls, ancient wards burning to life after centuries of silence. The chamber grew brighter, oppressive, holy. A chorus of distant voices, recordings or ghosts, none could tell, rippled through the air, chanting oaths that once guided the first brother. Mareth stepped back in awe, her breath shallow. "What have we done?" she whispered. Janus did not answer. He moved to the center of the sanctum, where the floor split open with a slow, grinding moan. From the depths below, a sarcophagus ascended, engraved with sigils older than Titan itself. The knights bowed their heads. Something sacred had been disturbed. Something that was never meant to see the light again. The lid shifted with a hiss of ancient pressure, and cold mist poured across the sanctum like the breath of a grave. Within lay a suit of armor gleaming silver, unmarred by time, adorned with inscriptions that flowed like scripture. Janus felt his heart tighten, not with fear, but with understanding. This was not a relic, it was a mantle, a responsibility. The armor seemed to radiate awareness, as though it recognized him, remembered him, judged him. The air pulsed with psychic weight, pressing against the minds of all present. One knight fell to a knee, overwhelmed, whispering litanies through clenched teeth. Janus reached out, fingertips brushing the ancient plate, and the sanctum filled with visions, shattered timelines, dying worlds, warnings etched in the warp itself. He saw the birth of the Grey Knights. He saw the first rituals of warding. He saw himself standing at the edge of two possible futures, one salvation, one damnation. When the visions faded, Janus realized the armor had chosen, and the galaxy would feel that choice. Outside on the ravaged plains, the sun finally broke through the war-torn clouds, illuminating the legions of the faithful gathering amid the debris of their shattered world. Chaplains walked among the wounded, reciting soft prayers that mingled with the stench of burning flesh and oil. Some soldiers stared at the sky as if expecting angels or demons, unsure which would arrive first. Rumors moved from group to group. Janus had found something. Janus had awakened something. Some whispered hope. Others whispered heresy. Captain Arctus of the 314th Cadian Regiment watched the distant fortress with hollow eyes. He had survived the impossible, but what he had witnessed in the last hours, the psychic flare, the shriek of warp-born entities tearing free, had carved new fears into him. "If this is victory," he muttered to his commissar, "I dread to see defeat." The commissar gave no answer. His gaze remained fixed on the fortress, as if he too sensed a shift in the fate of mankind. Within the sanctum, Janus donned the ancient armor piece by piece, each plate locking into place with a resonant thud that echoed through the chamber like a heartbeat. The inscriptions glowed bright enough to illuminate his face, revealing a man burdened but resolute. Marith watched, her hands trembling. "You don't have to do this," she said. It was the first time she had spoken as a human, not an inquisitor. Janus looked at her with something close to sorrow. "It was never a choice," he replied. "It is remembrance." The final piece, the helm, hovered above his palms, light shimmering across its runic surface. The knights knelt as he raised it. The fortress seemed to exhale. As the helm descended, a silent shockwave rippled outward, racing across the ruins, across the planet, across the veil of the warp itself. Every psyker within 100 leagues cried out. Every demon paused. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. The storm broke suddenly, alarms blaring as the sky split open with streaks of warp-touched fire. Orbital augers flickered, overloaded by impossible readings. Something was coming. Something vast. Janus walked from the sanctum with steady steps, his new armor radiating light like a shard of Luna's own surface. Knights followed, their faith renewed, their fatigue forgotten. Outside, soldiers scrambled to defensive lines, pointing toward the heavens as an expanding distortion tore through the firmament. Thunder rolled across the plains, followed by a deep, resonant hum, ancient and hungry. "Is it the enemy?" Marith asked. Janus paused on the last stair of the ruined fortress. "No," he said quietly. "It is an answer." The distortion widened, forming a circular tier of shimmering null light, and within it, shapes moved tall, armored, purposeful. The soldiers gasped. Even the chaplains faltered. For emerging from the rift were warriors clad in the same argent armor Janus now wore, warriors thought long dead, or never born at all. As the figures stepped fully into real space, their presence bent the light around them. Their armor bore markings no living scholar could decipher, their weapons forged in patterns predating the Imperium itself. Each step they took left a faint afterimage of purifying fire on the ground. The lead warrior removed his helm, revealing a face carved by centuries of struggle, yet untouched by decay. His eyes, pale, luminous, and impossibly calm, met Janus's across the battlefield. Soldiers whispered names. Knights fell to their knees. Marith felt tears burn her eyes. The air trembled as the ancient warrior spoke a single word, a word that shattered certainty and reforged reality in the same breath. "Brother." Janus bowed his head, not in submission, but in solemn recognition. The first had returned, but he was not alone. And neither was Janus, not truly. A distant explosion tore through the horizon, followed by a rising column of corrupt blood-red smoke. All heads snapped toward it. Vox feeds crackled with frantic warnings, enemy signatures blooming across the plains like a plague. The ancient warriors shifted formation, forming a silent, unbreakable line. Janus raised his warded blade, its runes glowing brighter than ever. "The storm chooses its moment," he said, voice layered with a depth Marith could scarcely comprehend. "And destiny chooses its battlefield." The ground rumbled as the approaching forces drew nearer, shapes twisting in the haze, chanting in voices that clawed at sanity. The final conflict was coming, heralded by prophecy, memory, and betrayal. As Janus took his place beside the returned ancients, he understood the true meaning of the visions. This battle was not for a world, not for a chapter, not even for the Imperium. It was for identity, for truth, for the soul of the Grey Knights. And as the first shadow of the enemy crested the ridge massive, wreathed in warp flame, unmistakably familiar, Janus felt the breath leave him. A presence he had hoped never to confront again, a face carved from his own past. A betrayal older than Titan. The battlefield froze, the wind died. Even the rift behind them dimmed. Mareth stepped forward, whispering, "Janus." "What is that?" But he already knew, and the knowledge hollowed him. "A memory," he said. "One that never should have survived." The giant figure raised its weapon, pointing directly at him. And in that final moment before the clash, the galaxy seemed to collapse into silence. The storm had arrived. The truth had come to claim him. The ruinous quiet settled slowly, like ash drifting after the last flame has surrendered to the dark. Where once the battlefield had roared with warp fire and brother turned against broken mirror of brother, now only the wind moved soft, wandering, unable to comprehend what had transpired. The figure that had risen against Janus lay shattered, its armor cracked open like a sarcophagus that had refused to keep its dead. And Janus himself stood motionless amid the ruin, silvered plates scorched and steaming, blade dimming as though exhausted by the revelation it had carved into the world. Around him, the ancients who had emerged from the rift lowered their weapons, their gazes heavy, distant. They understood what the galaxy never would, that victory, when paid in truth, always demanded something irreplaceable. The last echoes of war faded into the bones of the earth, leaving only memory to speak in whispers. Across the devastated plain, soldiers emerged from the smoke like mourners stumbling from a burning shrine. No cheers rose, no songs dared form. Those who survived simply stood in the pale, wounded light, staring at the colossal silhouette of Janus as if he were a fragment of myth returning to stone. Inquisitor Mareth limped through puddles of blood and oil, her voice a rasp barely stronger than the wind. Was it worth it? She asked, though she knew there could be no simple answer. Janus did not turn. His helm, scarred yet shining, tilted slightly toward the horizon, as if listening to the breath of the universe itself. Only the faint flicker of runes across his gauntlet betrayed life. In the long, hollow quiet that followed, Mareth felt something inside her settle, not peace, but understanding. The kind forged only when all illusions have burned away. The returning ancients gathered in a circle around the fallen memory, their armor humming with soft, mournful resonance. They lifted their hands, and a silver glow spread across the wreckage, purifying every trace of corruption until nothing remained, but dust carried gently on the air. Their leader approached Janus, his expression carved from equal parts pride and sorrow. "The past is finally at rest," he said, though the words felt fragile in the vastness of the moment. Janus finally looked away from the horizon, his voice emerging low, distant, as though spoken from the deepest vaults of Titan. "The past never rests. It only waits. Until we are ready to face it." The ancient nodded, accepting the truth without argument. For beings forged in prophecy and burdened by eternity, such words were neither comfort nor warning, merely another piece of the endless vigil they were sworn to uphold. The sky, once torn wide by warp fire, began slowly to mend, the colors shifting from bruised crimson to muted gray, as though the heavens themselves wished to forget what they had witnessed. It was then that the soldiers began their slow retreat, carrying their wounded, blessing their dead, whispering prayers that tasted of fear and gratitude alike. Chaplains walked in silence, their crozier staves dim, their voices too raw to preach. Some reached out to the Grey Knights in reverence, but the warriors did not speak. They simply stood, solemn, statues carved from divine burden. Marith lingered near Janus, watching the last remnants of the enemy's presence dissolve into the wind. "They'll never know," she said softly. "The Imperium will write this as another victory, another salvation." Janus's gaze hardened, not with anger, but with the quiet acceptance of one who carried truths too heavy for history. "Perhaps that is mercy," he murmured. When the portal that had birthed the ancients began to shrink, the air vibrated as if mourning their return. One by one, the timeless warriors stepped toward it, their silhouettes dissolving into silver haze. The last to remain was their leader. He placed his armored hand upon Janus's shoulder, an action steeped in ritual older than language. "You carry the burden now," he said. "Not of destiny but of choice." Then he stepped into the rift, and the Tyran reality sealed with a whisper, like the closing of a long-forgotten tomb. The moment it vanished, the battlefield felt impossibly empty, as if the galaxy had just lost a piece of itself. Janus lowered his head, listening to the silence left in their wake. It was the kind of silence that stayed with a man forever. Hours passed, the dead were gathered. Fires were lit, not pyres of victory, but candles of remembrance. The fortress that had awakened now lay dormant once more, its sanctum sealed by runes that glowed faintly, like embers refusing to die. Janus walked through the ruins alone, each step echoing with memories he wished were not his to bear. He paused beside a broken pillar, tracing the inscriptions etched into its stone, a history of vows, victories, sacrifices. He wondered how many of them had ever truly understood what they fought for. How many had glimpsed the truth he now carried? "Faith is a blade," he whispered to the empty hall. "And every blade cuts both ways." The words lingered in the stillness, settling into dust like the final note of a hymn. Marith found him there, though she approached as one would approach a shrine, not a man. "They'll ask what happened here," she said. "What shall I tell them?" Janus turned toward her, and though his helm concealed his face, she sensed the weight behind his silence. At last he spoke. "Tell them only that the Imperium endures." She frowned, troubled. "And the truth?" He studied her a long moment. "The truth is a burden for the few. Let the many keep their hope." A breeze passed between them, carrying the faint scent of ozone and scorched earth. Marith nodded slowly, understanding the cost such a choice demanded. In the eyes of history, truth mattered less than survival. And survival demanded sacrifice, one more nameless than any battlefield casualty. Dusk settled across the ruins like a shroud, painting the world in hues of morning violet. The soldiers had withdrawn to their camps, their fires flickering like scattered stars, fragile against the immensity of night. Janus climbed the tallest fragment of the citadel and stood overlooking the plains, watching as shadows swallowed the last remnants of the day. A lone servo skull drifted past, recording the devastation in silent, dutiful sweeps. One day, its fractured data might become a footnote in some distant archive. Or perhaps it would be lost entirely, swallowed by time as all tragedies eventually are. Janus raised his gaze to the stars, cold, indifferent, eternal, and wondered how many more battles waited beyond their silent glow. How many more truths would demand to be faced? The wind grew colder, the night deepened. And for a moment, Janus allowed himself a breath, a single heartbeat unarmored by duty. He felt the enormity of what had been won, and the greater enormity of what had been lost. The galaxy was quieter now, but not safer. The warp had recoiled, not retreated. The Imperium had survived, but survival was never victory. As he descended from the ruins, the question formed unbidden in his mind, haunting and vast. If humanity must surrender pieces of its soul to endure, what remains at the end worth saving? And beneath that, a quieter echo. How long can faith shine before it burns itself to ash? Morning broke pale and thin, struggling through the haze. The world felt older. Janus walked toward the waiting forces not as a savior or a legend, but as a guardian who understood the lonely road ahead. Marith fell into step beside him, saying nothing. There were no words left to give. Only duty. Only the long, unending march toward another war, another scripture, another shadow cast by the light of a dying star. Behind them, the citadel's ruins stood silent, as though listening to the final heartbeat of the past. And somewhere in that silence, history exhaled its last breath. If you felt the weight of this story, like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments.